Hello and welcome to lesson number 5 in the principles of exercise, fitness and health as part of our level 2 fitness instructor qualification. And today we're going to be looking at healthy eating, which is one of my personal favourite topics. So hopefully can make this nice and interesting and give you lots of insightful tips that you can take away to use as a gym instructor. And before we start, a bit of a precursor really, just something I'd like to add. When we go to level 3, there's a whole module on nutrition, okay? And healthy eating now at level 2, which is what we're looking at today, will give us a basic knowledge, all right, of what healthy eating is and the different components that make up a healthy diet. But when we go to level 3, this will be explained and covered in a lot more depth. So this is our building blocks, and when we go away and when we study level 3, we'll then be looking to take things to a much higher level. But our aim today is to be able to understand the importance of healthy eating, and in particular we'll be able to identify the common sources of key nutrients, explain what those key nutrients do in the body. We'll be able to explain the importance of adequate hydration. We'll look at the National Food Model and give you some sort of tips and advice and thoughts around that. And we'll be able to describe key healthy eating advice that underpins having a healthy diet. And then we'll look at something really interesting, which is the energy balance equation. Particularly helpful for any of you guys looking to help clients who want to lose weight. And we'll explain the health risks of poor nutrition. And finally, we'll cover off and we'll talk about what advice you can offer as a gym instructor and how you can work with your clients. And what we want to do first, we want to identify some of these key nutrients that are found in the body. And the first key nutrient that I want to talk about today is carbohydrates. All right, and carbohydrates, they come from sugars and starches, all right? So a sugar is something that can be found in fruits and sweets, all right? The sugars that we find in fruits are naturally occurring sugars, and the sugars that we find in sweets and chocolate bars and fizzy pop, they are carbohydrates that are sort of man-made, and they're not as good for us as the ones that we can find in fruits. We then also have starchy carbohydrates, so they can be found in things like bread, pasta, rice, potatoes. We find them in vegetables as well, but not as in such a high percentage. But that's where we can find our carbohydrates. And carbohydrates also contain some fibre, and that what fibre does is enable smooth passage of food through our digestive system and down through the digestive tract. We also have protein, okay? So we can get protein, or essentially protein is or contains amino acids, and they help with the growth of the body, and they help us with repairing tissue after exercise and making up the cell walls and the nervous system. That's what we use protein for. We use carbohydrate predominantly to get energy. We use protein really, it's like our rebuilding blocks. That's what we tend to use protein for. And we can get protein, we can get it from animal sources. So things like meat, poultry, fish, we get it in dairy. There's some protein in eggs as well. That's where we can get protein from. And when we want our clients to be working in a healthy way, we tend to go for more lean protein sources. So something like a fatty piece of steak will contain protein, but it will also contain a lot of fat. Something like a lean chicken breast will contain the majority of protein and not much fat at all. So that's a better source of protein for us to be going for in the most part. There's different ins and outs to be aware of, but in the most part, you'd want to go for a more lean protein source. You can get them from some non-animal sources, so especially vegans and vegetarian people will be looking to get their protein sources from grains, cereals, nuts and beans. And then we also have fats. So we've done carbohydrates, proteins, and we also have fats. And purpose of the fat is it's an important component of our cell membranes and our cell walls. It also produces some vitamins that we need in the body. In particular, you don't need to know which vitamins they are, but if you do want to, vitamins A, D, E and K are fat-soluble vitamins. Fat gives us insulation, so it helps us to keep warm, essentially, during the winter, and it provides protection for the internal organs. So a lot of our fat storage is in and around the internal organs, and that helps to protect them. It acts as a little bit of a buffer to keep them nice and safe. Fat also gives us energy, which we've covered off in the AMP module. And we store it and then we use it for energy, particularly when we're doing longer, more endurance type activities. And fat also makes up an important part of the brain and spinal cord. We have two different kinds of fats. We have saturated fats and we have monosaturated fats. Okay, saturated fats tend to be the fats that are regarded as being bad fats. Monosaturated tend to be the fats that you hear of being called good fats, and there's a lot of research around good fats and bad fats, but for the purpose of our level 2 qualification, we're not going to call them good or bad. We're going to call them saturated fats, and we're going to call them monosaturated fats. And our saturated fat will normally come from animal products, so we normally get saturated fat in meat and eggs and dairy products, which come from animals. And our monosaturated fats, there's a little bit in meat, but we get it from things like olive oil and avocados. They're a good place to be getting our monosaturated fats from. And then we also have our polysaturated fats, and they come from oily fish and sunflower oil. And we need a certain degree of all these fats in the diet. Having too much saturated fat is bad for us, but depends on the need of the person. Once again, it depends on what their genetics are, what their goals are, and what they're looking to try and achieve. And certain people can eat more saturated fat than others. But you know, if you've got someone who you want to be very lean, like a bodybuilder who's competing for a show, we're probably going to be staying away from the saturated fat. If we've got an athlete who wants to, a runner or a cyclist or a rower, and they want to be nice and lean and in competition shape, we're probably going to steer away from the saturated fat. If we've got someone maybe who's looking for weight gain, they're looking to gain some muscle mass, then we might get a little bit more saturated fat in the diet to help them with that. And then as well as our carbs, our fats and our proteins, we have our vitamins and minerals. And vitamins and minerals are essential for growth and repair. And we get our vitamins and minerals, we get them from all types of fruit and vegetables. And the more fruit and veg that you can get into someone's diet, the better, period, all right? You probably, I don't know, you might sort of saw different diets and different adverts on the TV. As much green, especially green veg, that you can get in the diet for someone, the better. There'll be so much more vitamins and minerals for them to help with their functioning of the body. You know, you can't go wrong with green veg, and even if you are going for more different colours, I definitely recommend it. And the more veg and the more fruit you can get in there, the more healthy that person is going to be. And let's have a little bit of a look at hydration now. So water is found both inside and outside of the body's cells, and there must be sufficient. We must have enough water essentially in the body to be able to support life. And the amount of water will depend on what's happening with that particular person. You know, if it's a very hot day, we're going to need more water. Pretty simple. If the body temperature gets particularly high during a workout, you're going to need more water. Or if it's a humid day, if it's a day where we're more active, so if it's a day where we're doing a lot of cardio stuff, and we might need more water compared to when we're doing some resistance type activity. We've also got our respiration rate, and that, if we're breathing more and we're working hard, we're going to need more water. And it's important for us to get water into people's nutrition. And it might be that they want to go with some fizzy water, they might want to add a slight flavouring. Just be careful that on the sugar content, and we're not loading people up with sugar. But if you can encourage your clients to be having more water and to be more hydrated, they're going to be more healthy and they're going to be able to perform better. You don't want them going into competition feeling bloated or heavy and full of water, but we want them to feel hydrated and able to perform. And now we know that what all these functions are, so carbs, proteins, fats, vitamins and minerals and water. We need to know what quantity of each one to be having. And in the UK, we have something called the Eat Well plate. And essentially, the Eat Well plate gives us an illustration of what a healthy person should be eating each day. So if you were to have a look at that plate there, let's look at the yellow section first of all. So that yellow section maybe makes up around about 25% of the diet. And that yellow section is for carbohydrates. And it's not our simple carbs. So it's not our sugars. It's not chocolate bars and biscuits and sweets. It's the more starchy carbohydrates. So bread, pasta, rice, potatoes, those sort of things should be making up that yellow section there. We then have the other big section, which is the green section. And the green section is fruit and veg. So a lot of our diet needs to be coming from carbohydrates and fruit and veg. We then have the smaller areas, okay? We have the light blue area, and the light blue is from milk and dairy. And you need to be careful with who you're working with, because some people might be dairy intolerant or lactose intolerant, but if they're not, they need to have that certain amount there of milk and dairy in the diet. So not as much as fruit and veg, not as much as those starchy carbs, but we can get some milk and dairy in there. Then right at the bottom, we have meat. So just on the left, so the pinky coloured one, that's our meat, fish, eggs, beans. Essentially, that's our protein section. And a normal, average person should be having that much protein. And then right at the bottom, you've got the bad stuff. So the purple section, that's our sugary stuff. Fizzy pop, Mars bars, all those unhealthy, junky type things that we should probably be staying away from. But this plate, okay, at level 2, this plate gives us a very good tool to go with if we're working with a person who's been away from exercise or wants to get healthy for the first time. This can work. However, if we're working with, for example, an athlete who wants to gain some quality muscle mass, there's going to have to be a lot more protein in the diet because they want to build a lot more lean tissue. You don't need to know that at level 2, but you might get questioned about it, and I think it's important to give you guys as much skills and knowledge as possible. So, if someone that's their goal, they want to build lean tissue, they're going to need more protein. If someone is doing lots of endurance type activities, they're going to need more fuel, so we're going to have to give them some more carbohydrates, okay? I wouldn't ever really change that fruit and veg section. I'd still keep that really high. Play around with the carbs, the fats and the proteins, depending on what the needs of the athlete are. And as I said, when we get to level 3, we will look at it in a lot more detail. And what we want to look at now that we know that what all these component parts are of a healthy diet, there's something called the energy balance equation. And essentially, the energy balance equation is a very, very simple calculation, okay? And it tells us that if we burn more calories than we take in, okay, so I'm burning more than I'm taking in, I will lose weight, Okay? If you look at the diagram on the right, if we eat more calories than we burn, we will gain weight. And this is a very, very simple way to explain how a person can either gain weight or lose weight. If you burn the same amount of calories as you take in each day, your weight will stay the same. Alright? If you burn more calories than you take in, you'll lose weight. And if you eat more calories than you burn, you'll gain weight. It's important to be aware that every person will need a certain amount of calories each day. For a man, it's going to be around about 2,500, and for a woman, it's going to be 2,000. So if you've got a woman eating 2,000 calories a day, and those 2,000 calories are coming from the Eat Well plate, and they're made up of the correct proportions on that plate, their weight is going to be pretty stable. Alright? Opposite to that, if you've got a man and he's eating 3,500 calories a day, and he's not doing any exercise, he's having about 1,000 calories too many a day, and he's going to start to gain weight. And that's a very, very simple way to look at and understand how weight loss can take place in the body. And if we're not careful about what we're eating, we leave ourselves open to a whole host of health risks, all because of poor nutrition. If we're eating too much junk or too much food, we're going to get obese. If we're eating too much fatty food, we're going to leave ourselves open to heart disease and those type of problems. We could even have a stroke or gain cancer from eating particular foods. Our metabolism could be particularly low if we're not eating hardly any food at all. If we're eating too much sugars and too much junk, we're going to leave ourselves open to diabetes and hypertension. And we could even be causing asthma or arthritis. So it is important to try and follow, particularly for yourselves as well, but all definitely recommending for the clients that we're working with, they need to be eating in the right way. Couple at the bottom. And here we go. So the last thing I want to cover off is looking at the type of advice that we can give. And it might be a little bit boring, but it's important that I get this one right. So I'm going to read it from the slide, and then I'll expand on it a little bit more if I feel that I need to. So, professional role boundaries in relation to offering nutritional advice. And what I'll do, I'll read it from the slide as I said, and then I'll go into a bit more depth. So, this qualification will not cover sufficient ground to arm the student with knowledge of how to manage disease and ill health with prospective nutrition, but will allow the instructor to offer generalised advice on the components of a healthy diet for normal, healthy individual to improve their nutrition. Where an instructor is faced with more serious diseases and ill health beyond their scope of practice, it is vital that they refer the client onto an appropriate, qualified and registered dietitian or nutritional therapist. These professionals will be able to analyse and test correctly to determine specific nutrient deficiencies and also prescribe food and supplementation accurately to overcome and promote optimal health. I hope that's made sense. And just to expand on it really, what this statement is trying to say, you're not going to be qualified as a nutritionist. So you can give general tips and advice around a healthy lifestyle and having a healthy diet, but you can't, if someone's got any particular problem and they have any particular ill health, you know, you're not a specialist in nutrition because of doing this level 2 qualification. Yes, we can give guidance and tips. No, we're not a specialist, and it's important to be aware of those boundaries. And we've covered that one off, and we should now be aware of the key dietary sources, so carbs, fats, proteins, vitamins, minerals and water. And we should be aware of what the nutrients do in the body and why it's important to be hydrated. We should be able to describe the Eat Well plate and how it's made up. And we should be able to also describe key healthy eating advice that's going to help our clients to be healthy. We know about the balance of energy and how that can help us to gain weight or lose weight. And we should know about the potential risks of poor nutrition and what exactly what nutritional advice we can offer as a level 2 fitness instructor. I hope it's been quite an interesting one for you. The next one is the last one on principles of fitness. So we're nearly there, guys. Stay with me, and I'll see you there. Thanks for listening.